Hello, my name is Jesper. With this series of movies, we teach you the playing method. The playing method is a way to learn how to play chess by using mini-games. That means simpler, less complex games that take you towards chess step by step. The very first mini-game that the beginner starts with is Cross the Board. And the Cross the Board is played with only the pawns, and you put them up like this. The white pawns should be placed on the second rank, and the black pawns should be placed on the 7th rank. The goal is for white to reach the other side with one pawn, that means the 8th rank. For black, the goal is to reach the 1st rank with one pawn, then black wins. Now it's time for the next step, and that is to add on pieces to cross the board. I usually start with the rook. The reason is that the rook moves horizontally and vertical, very easy for the beginner to understand. The rook moves like this. In the starting position of a game of cross the board with rooks, you place them in the corners like this, on h1, on a1, on h8, on a8. Then you win by crossing the board with one pawn or with a rook. One important thing. In this position, it's white to move. And white can reach the other side with a rook like this, and then the game finishes immediately. White wins, even though black can take the white rook in the next move. After the rook, I usually go to the bishop, and the bishop moves on the diagonal, like this, as far as it likes. In the beginning, in the starting position, you have two bishops each, one on the white squares and one on the black squares, and you put them on the F line and on the C line, like this. You put the white bishops on F1, on C1, on C8 and on F8 like this. And just like with cross the boards with the rook, you win by crossing the board with a pawn or reaching the other side with a bishop. So, next piece is the queen. The reason is that the queen combines the rook and the bishop's movements. It moves like this. As far as it likes, it can move both vertical and horizontal and on the diagonals, like this. In the starting position, you put up the queens on d1 and on d8, like this, and you win if you cross the board with one pawn or with the queen. Now it's time for cross the board with kings. And playing this game, I usually add an extra complexity into the game. But first, how does the king move? Just like the queen, it can move both horizontally and vertical and on the diagonals, but only one square at a time. One important thing is that when you start the game, you put up the kings on E1 like this and on E8 like this. One important thing is that you can, in this game, win with 3 different methods. I said that we add a complexity. First of all, you have the normal ones, that you cross the board with a pawn, or if you have the king like this, cross the board with a king like this. But if the kings should be placed beside each other, you win by taking the opponent's king. By this, you learn to use your king, to let it be active, but also to take care not to be taken. And let us see a game, a little small games of cross the board with the kings. White starts with e4. And the idea for white is to bring out the king like this, to try to reach the other side. And in this position, black can play a6 to make a threat on the king. And this could be smart, because if the king takes the pawn like this, the king will be taken and black wins. But in this position, what happens is that there is a hole on b6, and the white king, instead of taking the pawn, can sneak into the black position like this. And even though black now is trying to cover up the back rank, the white king reaches a7, and in the next move will reach the other side and white wins. Of course, when you play across the board, you can use all your pieces like this, like you put them up in the initial position of a real chess game and you win by reaching the other side. This is quite a fun game as well, believe me. Time to make a conclusion, a summary of what we have learned. Cross the board with pieces. Cross the board can be played with different pieces in different constellations. The pieces start in their initial position of a real game of chess. The one reaching the other side with one piece wins. Doesn't matter if it is a pawn or another piece. In cross the board with kings, you also win if you take the opponent's king. Why are these games so nice for the beginner? First of all, you train how the pieces move. Then, of course, also how they take. But also you have to plan a bit how to reach the other side, to calculate who will be the first to reach the other side. But finally and last, it's so fun to play real games, and that is a great motivator for someone who wants to learn to play chess. Bye!